This is a fully handmade Japanese flute from the good people at Sankyo, paired with a vintage solid silver head joint from the world famous Muramatsu flute company. If you wanted to pick up the modern equivalent of this, you'd be looking to spend about $5,000 or $6,000. But this is a flute from Aldi, a grocery store, and I bought it from an op shop for $50, including shipping. And yet, can you really hear a difference? Now, I'll grant you there is a slight difference, but let's be honest, it's a lot smaller than the price tag would suggest. Something that seems to be universal considering just how many people have explored this. So what gives? Are flute makers ripping off broke musicians with fairy tale flutes and fainted lies, or is there some other explanation? Well, here I am, one such scoundrel flute maker to explain. The whole concept of two instruments sounding different, especially when there's a price difference, seems to be one that applies to every instrument. Except flute. I mean, listen to even a beginner playing two different pianos or two different guitars. They're often very recognizably different. To understand why, we need to look at the source of the sound and where it goes before it reaches your ears. As an example, have a look at the guitar. When the player plucks the strings, they vibrate, and those vibrations travel down towards the bridge. The bridge then transfers these vibrations into the soundboard. From there, the soundboard vibrates and resonates within the chamber before all of it escapes out the sound hole. The vibrations start in the strings, formed by the player's plucking. Since that's the origin of the sound, both have a significant effect on the tone of the instrument, followed by the bridge, soundboard, chamber, and sound hole. When we play these two different guitars, they're played by the same player with the same technique, but they otherwise have different strings, bridges, soundboards, chambers, and sound holes, meaning that the sound ends up being very different indeed. So what about the flute? Where does sound start on the flute? Well, unlike the guitar or almost any other instrument, sound on the flute does not start with a vibrating object. Rather, on the flute, the player's airstream directly vibrates a column of air that's inside the tube, meaning that the source of the sound on the flute is you, the player. That means that the player producing the original airstream has a significant effect on the sound quality of the flute. But let's look at what happens to the airstream after leaving your lips. First, the sound hits the embouchure hole where it's split in two. It then enters the chamber where it meets resistance from the air that's already inside. A back and forth vibration is then formed on the inside of the flute, which escapes through whatever finger or tone hole is open. As such, the main elements that impact sound quality on the flute are the player, the embouchure hole, the width of the inside of the flute, also known as the flute's bore, the shape of that bore, and the size of the tone holes where the air escapes. Now, there are other factors that impact the sound of the flute as well, but these are the most significant 5, and from my experimentation, the order of most significant to least significant looks something like this. First, the player, having the most significant impact on the sound of the flute, then the bore size and shape coming in just below that, the embouchure hole a little lower, and the tone hole size being a bit below that. So let's apply this to our handmade Japanese flute and our used grocery store flute. Well, first it's the same player playing the same song in the same way. If we measure the bore size, they're both 19mm wide. Being modern Boehm flutes, they both use the Boehm bore, a cylinder with a slight parabolic taper in the head joint. Their embouchures are different, but their tone holes, while being slightly different, are practically the same size. So that means 4 out of our 5 most important factors for flute sound quality are identical. No wonder they sound so similar. And this is true of just about all modern flutes. Bore size affects sound a lot, but it also affects range. And since we expect our modern Boehm flutes to reach a 3-octave range, we sort of need the bore to be 19mm wide. Making the bore smaller would make it very difficult to play the lowest notes, and making it wider would make it very difficult to play the highest notes. So makers are kind of stuck. They're also stuck with bore shape. I mean, this is the Boehm flute. You're meant to use the Boehm bore. Boehm flutes also require the enormous tone holes that they have, so you can't really make them much smaller to get some interesting tonal changes. Embouchure holes are something that makers can experiment with, however, and that's part of why embouchure holes and head joints with them are such a big focus for metal flute makers and players. Now, that's not to say that there are no differences between an expensive flute and a cheap one. In particular, how the flute feels to play and its reliability can be significant factors. And while embouchure holes are low on the list in terms of how much they impact a flute's sound, they have a very significant impact on how the flute feels to play. And other aspects like the mechanism, which doesn't really contribute to sound at all, can completely change the way the flute feels to play. But what if we are concerned with sound and we do want that different sound? Well, then we have to start changing some of the other aspects. This is an Irish flute. It's still being played by me, and its embouchure is quite close to the one on my Muramatsu head joint, but it has a completely different bore and tone hole size. And with those two differences, you can now see that we're starting to hear something that sounds quite different, although still like a flute. So what if we take it to another extreme? This is a piccolo, and it has a completely different embouchure, completely different bore size, different bore shape, and different tone hole size. As such, this now sounds completely different to the metal flute. But Ethan, it's less than half the size! Well, sure, but when playing the same note, it doesn't actually matter as much as you might think. You see, by opening holes in the flute, we're effectively cutting short how long the flute is. So by playing the high notes on the flute and the lower notes on the piccolo, we're able to make the internal vibrating column of air very nearly the same length. And the result? They still sound completely different. And even if you didn't believe me in that demonstration, here's one of my piccolos for comparison. This is a classical piccolo made from grenadilla by Yamaha, and this is one of my passion flute play piccolos. Even though they look quite different, the main difference in sound is that this has been designed for classical music, and this has been designed for folk, game, or pop music. They both have conical shaped bores, but the Yamaha's is quite narrow, whereas my conical piccolo is quite wide. They're both piccolos, but where the Yamaha is very bright and shrill, designed so that it can be heard over the back of an entire orchestra, my passion flute is far more mellow, making it better suited for playing in small groups, small rooms, or close-up recording. And most of that difference is just coming from the different size of bore. Effectively, the reason why metal flutes sound so similar is that they've been designed to be similar, to fit a particular mold, to suit a particular context, although that context doesn't suit all kinds of music that flute players might want to play, leaving some players wanting more. Now that said, I don't want to discredit this instrument. The Boehm flute is very good, and I don't want us to move away from it. That would rather defeat the point. Rather, what I want is for flute players to have the freedom and opportunity to choose different types of flutes to suit the different types of contexts that they may want to play in the same way that guitar players, even those just playing for fun, are able to explore different guitars and play around with them. So I encourage you, if you're feeling like you're looking for more, then consider having a play around with some other flutes, whether that's Irish flutes, my own passion flutes, bamboo flutes, or something else entirely. You might just find something that's not only special, but complements what you have already. If you found that interesting, I'm planning on making a video specifically talking about bores, the different types, and how they affect sound. Once I'm done, I'll pop it right up over there, but in case I haven't finished it yet, perhaps consider subscribing or leaving a friendly comment encouraging me to finish it. If you would like to support us further, you can also consider popping over to our website and exploring our range of flutes. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and I hope you got something out of it.